really honored to be in this space with all of you and with this amazing collection of Black female law school deans. This is an amazing time to be a law school dean. And I will tell you that it always lifts my heart to be surrounded by so much Black excellence. So thank you for letting me bask in your glow. My path to the position that I now hold was a little bit winding. I was one of those people who knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a lawyer. I was about 10 years old when I decided that. And I also decided that I wanted to use my law degree in service of the public good. I basically imagined myself as a female Thurgood Marshall and marching up the steps of the US Supreme Court and changing the world. So I went to law school right after college, and in fact, I went to law school right here at Columbia Law School, so I took classes in this room. It's a little strange to be back here. I graduated from law school, I got a postgraduate public interest fellowship, and I started my legal career. So at the time, I was living in New York City. I was working at a small nonprofit in Manhattan called the HIV Law Project as a public interest lawyer. And I started to think about how I could make a bit more money to supplement what I was bringing home from my job, which wasn't very much. And I decided that I would make a good professor. So I started looking for adjunct teaching jobs that would allow me to do some teaching, make a little bit more money, but keep my day job. One Sunday, I was looking through the New York Times education section, where they always have a supplement with education jobs, and I saw an ad for teaching positions at NYU Law School in their lawyering program. Now, when all of you future law students arrive for your first year of law school, you will all be required to take a class in legal research and writing, and at NYU, this class was called lawyering. And the job was a full-time job, and that wasn't what I was looking for, plus I was absolutely confident that I was wholly unqualified for this position, mostly because I'd only been out of law school and practicing for a few years. I did a pretty impressive job of talking myself out of applying for the job, but then I decided on the very last day that you could turn in an application that I should just go ahead and turn it in, because what was the harm if I did that? To my surprise, I got a first interview, then I got a second interview, and then I got hired. And several months later, I was teaching at a law school, which was pretty surreal. And that unexpected NYU job changed the trajectory of my life and career. I went from having a 3-year contract at NYU to being an assistant professor at Rutgers, and eventually earned tenure and then a promotion to full professor. But the 10-year-old who wanted to be a lawyer because lawyers did good in the world was still very much a part of me and remains a core part of who I am. I've always treated my career in legal academia as a chance to be what I call an academic activist. That means that I want to be a person who uses the platform and privilege that come from this role to amplify issues and voices that I believe need to be heard and heeded in this country. Now, having not angled to be a law professor, I certainly was not angling to be a law school dean. And in fact, one of the very first conversations I ever had about being a law school dean was in this classroom with Camille Nelson, who is also a Black female law school dean. And I basically scoffed at her when she suggested that I should be thinking about this. But as we all know, life often has its own plans for us, and sometimes we fall up instead of falling down, and that is very much what happened to me. Quite unexpectedly, in fall 2018, the chancellor on my campus came to me and said, "Would you be willing to become dean of the law school if our then dean accepted a job elsewhere?" And I, sort of in shock, reluctantly said yes. And so by January 1st, 2019, I officially became the dean of Rutgers Law School in Camden. And that's when things got pretty weird. So I don't expect you to know anything about the history of my law school, but I'll tell you that it began in 1926 as South Jersey Law School, and then through various twists and turns, we eventually became a branch of Rutgers many years later. In the 93 years that my law school has existed in some form, almost a full century, every dean at Rutgers Law School in Camden was a white man. So I get to stand here today as the first Black person, the first woman, and the first LGBTQ person ever be the dean at my law school. So let that sink in, if you will. In its 90-plus year history, no one who looked like me or had my life experiences had ever had the job that I now have. I know, of course, that I am the Black, gay, female dean at my law school, not because I am the first qualified person like me to come along, or because I'm singularly talented and therefore rose to the top. There were undoubtedly women and people of color and women of color at many points in my law school's history who could have been excellent deans. And if any of those people had achieved this first before I did, especially had they done so 40 or 50 years ago, that person would have had to be truly excellent. We can be confident in that fictitious person's excellence because rising to the top when you're mediocre or even average is a privilege seldom given to those who live at the margins of power in the US. And if anyone had doubts about that simple truth, the ongoing fallout from the college admissions scandal that involved many very rich people buying admission to college for their children should put those doubts to rest. Unsurprisingly, the media relations folks at my institution wrote a press release about my appointment that touted the 3 firsts that I brought to the role with me. And I was truly overwhelmed by all the publicity I received when the announcement of my appointment went public. I was interviewed for and appeared in multiple articles about my appointment, including being the cover story of my town magazine. I got invited to lots of different places to deliver talks. I had receptions thrown in my honor. I heard from friends and acquaintances from high school, from college, from law school who I hadn't talked to in years, if not decades. I even received a congratulatory email from the preschool teacher who taught me how to read. And I was on the receiving end of hugs and handshakes from staff who work in multiple offices around my campus, from folks on our custodial staff, from campus security, who expressed so much joy in seeing me in this role. And at several of my speaking engagements after becoming dean, I had young Black women in particular approach me to introduce themselves, to chat, sometimes to give me a hug. And I was so proud that I could be someone in whom they saw themselves reflected. Now, I'll confess that the attention has been pretty overwhelming for a while, and it took me a bit to really appreciate why people were making a big deal out of my appointment, especially when, to be frank, I thought it was a tad embarrassing that I was ticking off so many identity boxes at a point when these firsts should have already been long past. But the more I thought about it, the more it all made sense to me. When someone like me succeeds, Black, a woman, gay, in this very public way, it feels like a victory for so many folks whose journeys have been much more difficult than my own. I got tapped for the deanship because I'm very talented, I am smart, I am hardworking, but I am not uniquely special in that way. I became a dean because I'm very talented, smart, hardworking, and I had opportunity. And that opportunity came my way because of the path that others forged for me before I was even born. And it's only because the path I walked was paved before I arrived that I was able to walk it with some ease. Like everyone in this room, I didn't get here by myself. I know that I stand on the shoulders of giants, and that, to paraphrase James Baldwin, my crown was already bought and paid for, and all I had to do was wear it. I got to this place where I can wear this metaphorical crown because of the unbowed backs of women like Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer, Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan, and Angela Davis. I got here because of the Black women who walk miles to their jobs as maids and housekeepers rather than sit in the back of the bus. I got here because of the Black women who sat defiantly at whites-only lunch counters and refused to be moved. I got here because of the Black women who sued to stop sexual harassment in their workplaces. I got here because of the Black women who sat in boardrooms full of white men and refused to leave the table. I got here because someone else would not take no for an answer and demanded that this country become what it has long claimed to be, a place where anyone can be anything if she is willing to work hard. Now, I come from a long line of kick-ass women, both inside and outside of my family, and I'm glad to follow in their footsteps. And I'm so proud to make these women who made me proud of what they've made. And as a dean, as was true when I was a professor, I require of myself that I use this role in ways that will benefit others. It saddens and frustrates me that the legal profession remains one of the least diverse professions in this country. I am particularly grateful to be a law school dean at this time because I get to make sure that my institution lives up to its professed commitments to diversity, inclusion, and belonging in our building and in the profession. And I can assure you that that aspect of my job is not easy. Law schools are a critical cog in the machine that will build a better world. As legal educators, we must take seriously our responsibility to build diverse student bodies, support students who may struggle academically or otherwise because they're first-generation college or law students or have had an unusual path to law school. And we must actively inculcate values of professional responsibility, including a responsibility to use one's law degree to pursue justice in ways big and small. But we can't send great lawyers out into the world unless they get opportunities. For too many folks who look like me and most of you, law school is a pipe dream. Even in 2019, we live in a country that would rather see us in prison garb than a power suit. At this time when it feels like the world is on fire, I know that many of us are pulled in multiple directions when we think about how best to use our time, our money, and our skills. But as a person who began her law career as a public interest lawyer, I remain deeply convinced that law school changes lives just as lawyers change lives. As I've moved through my life and earned lots of opportunities, some of which, like this one, I did not seek, I often think of a line from Maya Angelou's poem, Still I Rise, and it's one I'm sure that many of you have heard before. She wrote, "I am the dream and the hope of the slave." I often reflect on the power of that truth. My ancestors, our ancestors, came to this country in chains and survived all manner of degradation and dehumanization so that we can stand here today. And so that Stacey Abrams could be the first Black woman from a major party to run for governor, and she probably won if it wasn't for voter suppression. That Ayanna Pressley could be the first Black woman sent to Congress from Massachusetts, and that Kamala Harris could make a bid for the presidency of the United States. We need more good lawyers out there fighting a good fight in courtrooms, in boardrooms, in law schools and law firms, in state legislatures, and in Congress. We need more people like me who fall up. We need more people who see these opportunities and who seize them. And we need more people who will wear that crown even when it feels quite heavy. So I'm going to wrap up by sharing some words from the poet Audre Lorde. In her poem, A Litany for Survival, she wrote, "When we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard, nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive." We were never meant to survive, and yet here we all sit, using our voices, our power, our righteous anger, and our faith, not to make America great again, but to finally make America great. Being a first has not always been easy, and I don't expect it to get easier in the months and years to come. But one of the most important reasons for me to be in this role is that we've gotten this particular first out of the way at my school. And now we get to move on to the next one, and the next one, and the one after that, until there are no more doors that we have to beat down and no more ceilings that we have to shatter. My job is to usher in a future where doors are flung wide open, where all that sits above us is sky, and where we can truthfully say to our children, in this country, if you work hard, you can be anything you want to be. Thank you.